Let's get into it. Sold Not For Sale podcast, episode 701 of the podcast. We got Tucker Carlson talking about the possibility of a war with Iran and what that could look like. And the whole time he's talking about this, he makes some great points. He's talking to a man who's very knowledgeable. But the whole time I'm listening to this, I'm just thinking, why? Why do men who are millionaires, who do not have to work like the general public works, get to tell the general public that we are going into wars? And a matter of fact, I need some of you to go in there and die. Why is that a possibility that the public of any nation is okay with? Why is that not contested at all by anybody? I don't understand at all. But let Tucker go into it. He makes some great points in this one. He's talking to a very knowledgeable man. Let's go.
We seem to be heading to war with Iran. Certainly the Biden administration is pushing us in that direction. What's new and interesting and ominous is that very few Republicans, the opposition party, are pushing back. Instead, some of the party's leaders are encouraging it. Here, for example, is Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina from last weekend on NBC.
You said this week that the only way to keep the war from escalating is to hold Iran accountable, part of what you're talking about now, and that it might mean bombing their oil refineries.
Yeah.
Have you had any discussions with the Biden administration about this?
A bit. Here's my message. If Hezbollah, which is a proxy of Iran, launches a massive attack on Israel, I will consider that a threat to the state of Israel, existential in nature. I will introduce a resolution in the United States Senate to allow military action by the United States in conjunction with Israel to knock Iran out of the oil business. Iran, if you escalate this war, we're coming for you.
Are you effectively poised to declare war on Iran? That's very strong language.
I am poised to use military force to destroy the source of funding for Hamas and Hezbollah.
No, that's Lindsey Graham. Few others in the Republican Party will be that open about their intentions, but very few disagree with him.
Just really quick, why does Lindsey Graham get to say that? Why does he get to go on national TV and give messages to Iran? Why is that allowed? Why is it that you and I can't talk to these officials, but they can talk to all of us and other countries and say, this is what we're going to do? It's so crazy. It's so crazy. Look up Lindsey Graham. He's terrible. Look him up.
Certainly not in private. They agree. So what would war with Iran mean? Well, it's hard to know because virtually no one who's talking about it in public is operating from a deep interest in America's interest. Is this good for us or is it not? Former Colonel Douglas McGregor is the CEO of Our Country, Our Choice, and one of the first people we turn to for analysis of events like this because he is interested in what happens to the United States. He joins us now. Doug, thank you for coming on. Do you think that we are moving toward war with Iran?
Yes, I do. And it looks like the chosen destination is indeed Armageddon. There doesn't seem to be any real appreciation for the implications for us and frankly, for Europe and the world, as well as the Middle East, of such action. You know, take for an example, just on the economic side, about 20% of the world's oil passes through the Straits of Hormuz every month. Probably 25% of liquefied natural gas. And you're talking about shutting down 2 to 3 million barrels a day of oil from Iran. This entire region is involved in the war. This is not an Iranian monopoly by any stretch of the imagination. But the point is that when we're looking at 10-year Treasury yields up over 5%, and people are increasingly convinced that the Fed has lost control, the economic side of the house is catastrophe. Then when you look at the military side, you have to look at the arsenal of missiles that Iran possesses. And they can reach out 1,200 miles with great precision, very high explosive conventional warheads that would do enormous damage, destroying whole city blocks in places like Haifa, Tel Aviv, even Jerusalem, though I doubt they would attack Jerusalem. The bottom line is that we need to think this through, and everyone right now is emoting There is no thinking anywhere, as far as I can tell. The only possible exception may be, amazingly enough, Mr. Erdogan in Turkey, who came out this morning and indicated he was willing to mediate the dispute between Israel and Hamas. Whether or not anyone in Washington or Israel is interested in talking, I don't know. But if we could sideline Turkey and keep Turkey out of the fight, that would ultimately help Israel enormously.
So what would happen to the United States if we followed Senator Graham's advice and just began bombing critical infrastructure in Iran? Like what would happen then?
Well, all of the bases that we have in Iraq and Syria, unfortunately, where we still have over 1,000 Americans, all of those would be targeted, and this time they would target them accurately, and this destruction would be wholesale. I would expect trouble here at home and in the United States because of the open border. Hezbollah has a very large operation in Mexico. There are no doubt many Hezbollah agents inside the United States. We can only begin to imagine the kind of trouble they could cause. The missile and space program in Iran is very advanced, as is their cyber warfare capability. All of these things would be brought to bear against us. But what's most important, I think, for Americans to understand is if we attack Iran on the basis of Hezbollah's alleged willingness to attack Israel if Israel invades Gaza, we will end up in a fight with Russia. Russia will not sit by quietly and watch Iran destroyed by the United States air and naval power in the region. And once Russia enters this, it becomes much more than just a local conflict, maybe more than just a regional war. We haven't thought this through. We need to do that. And I doubt seriously at that point that the Turks would be able to stay out. The Turks are Sunni Muslims. They are the de facto leaders of the Sunni Muslim world. They have the largest armed forces in the region. They are in close proximity to Israel. They could move forces south through Syria very rapidly. And I'm sure Bashar al-Assad, assuming he even survives the opening of this campaign, would not obstruct them.
So many questions, but just to back up one click, you described Iran's missile arsenal, but Iran is a country that's been the subject of a very intense sanction regime from the United States, increased by the last president, Donald Trump, but for a long time. How is Iran still such a powerful country militarily given those sanctions? It sounds like maybe they didn't work.
Oh, no, I think that's an important point, Tucker, and you're absolutely right. We place so much value on these sanctions and assume that they have this profound impact. Normally, sanctions harm the population in terms of lowering its standard of living, making life more difficult for the everyday citizen, but it doesn't fundamentally alter the policy or the goals and objectives of the government. And this is something that I don't think we understand. And the same thing is true for Hamas and Gaza. You know, you want to go after Hamas. You want to destroy it. I think everyone with a sound mind is interested in the destruction of Hamas. But do you want to kill hundreds of thousands of people in order to get at Hamas? That's the question. We have the same problem in Iran. Our sanctions have not harmed the regime's ability to develop and build very complex and sophisticated missiles. These missiles are very accurate now. There are hundreds, if not thousands. And the long-range missiles, the 1,200-mile range theater ballistic missiles, are a very serious threat to us in the region and to Israel. And the sanctions have had no impact there. If anything, the Iranians have pulled together the best human capital in their country, the best engineers, the best thinkers, and put them to work primarily on missile technology and on cyber warfare. And that's where we stand right now. We have to expect the worst as a result if we strike Iran.
How is the U.S. military, do you think, having spent your life in it, leading troops in combat and at the Pentagon, positioned to respond to war with Iran right now? Are we in a strong position or not, in your view?
No, I don't think we're in a strong position. I think we're probably at the weakest point in our recent history. I think you've got to look at the realities of new weapon systems, new capabilities. The United States Navy, if it's going to preserve its capability at sea, is probably going to be compelled to operate somewheres north and west of Sicily. If it comes within closer range, then it falls into this envelope where the Iranians can strike it. And as I said before, we have to assume the Russians will come into this. Once you move into the Eastern Mediterranean, you are vulnerable to the Kinshal missiles and other missiles, cruise missiles and hypersonic missiles that the Russians have. This makes it very difficult to fly strikes in support of the Israeli Defense Force against Hezbollah, because now you're flying a very long distance. You deliver your ordnance, you have to land in Israel in order to refuel. Israel is going to operate under a hail, if not a rainstorm, of missiles and rockets, making it very, very dangerous to do so. So our naval power, while substantial, may not have the desired impact on the ground that we would like. And then finally, we have no real army anymore. The army is down to perhaps, 450,000. How much of that is ready to fight is open to debate. Much of it is sitting in Eastern Europe right now. We don't have the means to rapidly ship a large force of 80 to 100,000 troops on the ground into the region, which means that we're reliant on special forces and right now 2,000 Marines and perhaps 2,000 special forces and special operations forces. That's not going to make much of a dent. And as we've seen quite recently within the last 24 hours or so, some of our special ops forces and Israeli special ops forces went into Gaza to reconnoiter, to plan for where they might want to go to free hostages and make an impact. And they were shot to pieces and took heavy losses, as I understand it. I think that's where we're headed. And I don't see that as a win for Israel in any way, shape, or form, and I certainly think it's very dangerous for us. You know, as I've tried to point out to a number of people, until Britain entered World War I, it was just another European war. Once Britain entered it, it became a global war. Well, once we are a co-belligerent, we enter this thing, it's going to be very difficult for Russia and Turkey not to also come into this fight against us, because they will not tolerate the sort of collective punishment that Israel plans for Gaza.
Very, very, man. Again, right away, what comes to mind is why are we allowing this at all? Why? It's the one thing that can impact, not the one thing, but something that can impact the public so much, society, the citizens, so much, and they have zero say in it. And in fact, because of how it all happened, how there's usually an anti-war movement with any war that comes about, there has been a little bit, but not as much as, Nam or anything like that. An anti-war movement. I don't know. It seems very, very odd how they got everybody on board with this so easily. It's like we forgot. You forgot what happened with BLM, right? If you didn't support every single thing they were doing, you were racist. We forgot. We got put into this situation. And now it's like, if you don't support this 100%, you are anti-Semitic. And if you are for it, you're either anti-Semitic or you're for open air prisons and an apartheid state. It's like one of the two. Like pick what you want. And if you don't want either, well then sit this one out. It's weird. And if you're for innocent lives in Palestine, well then you're for Hamas. And if you're outraged at what's happened to the Israeli innocent citizens who perished, well then you're somebody you're a sympathizer for these colonizers. Seems like a lot of branding. A lot of branding goes along with this whole thing. I don't know. Seems odd. If you're America first, you're a white nationalist. You're terrible. You're worse than Kyle Rittenhouse. Shout out to Kyle Rittenhouse. I wish the public could step in and say, no, we won't allow this. We don't want this. It's just, why do these small amount of people who clearly don't care about the public get to decide the public's fate. They get to decide how the public's economy is going to work. They get to decide whether or not the nation's going to go to war. They get to decide not to fix the problems that the public has. And then they get to decide how much tax they take from the public. Like, what? How? Let me know what you think in the comments section about all this, about everything you heard Tucker's analyst of sorts has to say. Also, the guy worked for the Pentagon, so I don't know if I can trust the guy who worked at the Pentagon. Well, yeah, maybe you can. I don't know, man. It's hard to find a platform that isn't fear-mongering, in a sense. But I know Tucker, because I hear his speeches, and I know that he's America first. I know that he wants what's best for America. He would like for the powers that be of America to focus on America. I know that's what he says, you know? But it seems like there's no one who thinks that's a good idea right now. But it's funny because no one whose voice is in these massive megaphones, in these platforms, you're not hearing them. But if you ask people in the general public, they'll be like, yes, stay out of this completely so nothing happens to us, so we can be safe. And make sure my son can buy a house. You know? And make sure that the prices of food goes down. However you do that. You know? I don't know. I just I feel like the majority of people are so unheard in regards to this topic. You know? It's a small amount of people who really go out and they're pro-Palestine. They got these Palestinian flags and they're running around cities and stuff. I think it's such a small amount of people. You know? I don't know. Anyways, guys, let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know. Like the video if you haven't liked it already. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. We're in the 700s. Congratulations if you made it this far with me. Thank you so much. I'm out.